Hi, everyone. It's Violet here. I'm so excited. I love when I get the opportunity to host our FemCity podcast. And today's session is also going to be in our YouTube channel. So I'm super excited. Our theme for the month of May is all about balance. And I'm a huge believer in balancing wellness and health. And it's all connected to your revenue and your productivity and your efficiency. So, as a former certified personal trainer and certified Pilates instructor, this conversation today is totally my jam, especially that I'm over 50. So, our guest today is actually an expert in this arena as well. Today, I have Elizabeth Sherman. She's part of our FemCity Founders Program, and she is a master certified life and health coach in this huge arena of health and wellness for women in midlife, which is where I'm at. Elizabeth stands out as an example of what's possible for women in midlife. Her journey in this field began over 17 years ago, driven by a personal quest to reduce her own risk of breast cancer and tackling the health challenges that she faced. So this journey transformed into a calling to empower other women facing similar crossroads. And her approach is not just about addressing physical health, but it's also a holistic approach as well. So let's dive in, Elizabeth. I'm so excited that you're here. Welcome to the FemCity podcast /
Thanks
YouTube
for having
channel.
me. I am so excited that we're having this conversation.
Me too. So we've been doing more and more in this realm of topics because I always felt that there was a connection between wellness and the way that you live life, whether you're happier, you sleep better, and then it's also connected to your revenue, how much money you get added into you add into your pocket. And I know some of our friends were like, it's not a business conversation. Like, why are we talking about that? And I'm like, it totally is a business conversation because when we feel better, I feel that we do better and our vibe is higher and therefore we make more money. So that's where I wanted you to come in. I know it's not technically a business class, but I think it kind of is. Well, not class, podcast session.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure you agree.
Yeah. Well, and we're going to be talking about it next Monday on in our private group within FemCity as one of the benefits that FemCity members get, right?
Yeah.
But it totally is connected because when we feel good, we present well.
Yeah.
And so when our health is good, then we feel good. And so it's really super important and I think that something that we've learned as young women that really hasn't served us is having a destructive relationship with food and exercise and how we've been socialized. And so we use food to manage our emotions. And then we've been taught through diet culture that we need to exercise it off, right? The whole calories in versus calories out approach. And as a result, I find that many women in their 50s are still struggling with the same diet advice that we were doing when we were in our 20s, except now it no longer works because of our hormonal changes. Our body has changed, and the diet and exercise advice that we have is all based on the physiology of college-aged men. And so women our age are going around trying to figure out, hey, why isn't this working for me anymore? And that's why. And so what diets tend to do, the approaches tend to do, is they tend to take out one macronutrient. So, like, for example, keto takes out carbohydrates, vegetarian takes out protein, and then there's also low fat. And when we do that, it creates an off balance within our physiology. And so each woman is completely different with how food and exercise impacts us. And so we just need to figure out what is the right cocktail or protocol for myself.
Yeah, I love that. So, and I've always been very open about my past with eating. And I think the reason why I got into personal training and teaching Pilates in my early 20s is I was very heavy as a child, as someone who's Cuban American. You know, Cubans have the worst diet, by the way. Like our staples, our everyday are very, very unhealthy. And growing up with that environment and then being a chubby, overweight child and getting made fun of and getting bullied, it led me into having severe eating disorders. And I didn't realize it was an eating disorder. So I was that teenager, young adult that would spend days not eating and doing like step aerobics, which, if you're over 50, you know what I'm talking about, like over, step aerobics, or aerobic activities, and running after. I used to do step aerobics and I'd go for a run after. And so I think I really messed up. And then I went to the other extreme, and then I was like, okay, now I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to study it. Got my personal training certification, actually the same one that you have. I saw it on your bio, a certification, and started becoming like vegetarian and vegan. And come to find, I'm pre-diabetic, and all that vegan food that I was eating was not the best for me. So I love that you said for myself, because everyone is different. What works for someone doesn't work for everybody else. And the key being balance. I mean, I feel like I have a really strong balance now. I have to say that eating disorder still lingers around. Like I sometimes fixate too much on the scale. It's a struggle that I, every day I'm like, you know what, it's okay. Hitting menopause definitely threw a wrench in that, but it led me into really diving into a little bit deeper about the hormonal balances and things that I can do. So I love where this is going. And so you mentioned hormonal imbalance. And I think that's a key concern for many women in their 50s and 60s, at least my girlfriends. What are some effective strategies that you recommend for your clients, your patients? I don't know what terminology you use. I used to use students, but what are some recommended managing hormonal changes during this phase? Because that seems to be such a huge topic, but no one ever shares like what's the advice on that? They're like, oh yeah, hormonal imbalances, like take a patch, put a patch on. But like, what are some things that we can do?
Yeah, so that's such a good question. And it's going to be difficult to answer because everyone is so completely
Yeah.
different. So, first of all, there are over 84 symptoms of menopause and perimenopause. And so, what I do with my clients is I help my clients manage their hormonal symptoms. So, night sweats and hot flashes and joint pain and brain fog and all of that through lifestyle. I definitely respect that medication is a route for some. And I encourage my clients that if they want to do that, that they should talk to their doctor about what's best for them. That being said, what I do is I work with my clients looking at what I call 5 different biomarkers. And those 5 different biomarkers are our cravings, our appetite, our sleep, our stress or mood, and finally, our energy levels. And so, what we really want is for all of those things to be firing on all cylinders. So, we want low cravings, stable appetite, solid sleep, uh, not stressful mood, not lots of mood swings, and then stable energy throughout the day. And so, what we really want to do is what I teach my clients to do is become a diet detective, or a detective that connects the dots between one thing and its results. So, oftentimes we will get down on ourselves because we're like, oh my God, I just ate like 5 Oreos or whatever it is. And what we don't see are the precursor steps that actually caused that to happen. And a couple things that cause sugar cravings are, one, not getting good quality sleep. And so, one thing that we can do is, well, I shouldn't say one thing we can do. When our body doesn't get good quality sleep, what happens is the cells in our body don't regenerate properly. And when our cells don't regenerate, it doesn't make energy. And so that 3 o'clock crash that we have, that's because our body is like, I need energy. I'm tired. I didn't get good sleep. I know what'll fix it: chips or carbs or sugar or whatever it is. And so, what we really want to do is we want to start connecting the dots between one thing and the next. So, a story about this is one of my clients, she was hanging out with a girlfriend who she hadn't seen in a while, and she made the decision to go for a second and third glass of wine. And as a result, she had terrible sleep because that happens to us now that we're getting older,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
We haven't changed, but our bodies have changed. So, and that's a common complaint for a lot of women. They're like, I didn't do anything different and everything is changing. And that's because our bodies are changing, our hormones are shifting. And so, because of that poor sleep, the next day she was dragging ass and she found herself overeating in the company pantry, eating pretzels. And she was like, why am I doing this? And so, what I teach my clients is that one shift, like one decision, like drinking the second and third glasses of wine, we want to do that. I don't tell my clients that they can't ever do something. What I do is I help them to see the impact of those decisions. And so my clients, like when we're at dinner and you're on a diet, right? You're like, I can't drink wine because it's not on the diet, right?
Mhm.
But then we're like, Elizabeth's not here. She's not the boss of me. So I'm going to have wine. And then this thing happens, right? When we take ownership of our actions and actually are able to connect the dots between, well, when I drink wine, then I don't sleep well. At least we're doing it from a place of empowerment. And I know that when I don't sleep well, then I'm not going to have energy. I'm not going to be as sharp the next day. And I might find myself craving, sugar in the afternoon. Great. Now you know that when you are in the company pantry and you're looking for pretzels or Oreos or whatever it is, you're like, you know what? I know that this is because I didn't sleep well. And so therefore, I'm going to have an apple instead, or whatever your decision is. So it allows, by understanding how food and exercise and sleep impact your body differently as we move into our or out of our reproductive years, we can attack it in a much more empowered way.
Yeah, I love it. It's like a very curated, intentional response to what you're going to choose to enter into your body. I when I was listening to you speak, sharing that right now, it reminded me like many years ago, I discovered through a series of blood work that I am very allergic to shrimp. And
Mm,
so now I'm like so scared to even try it. People are like, oh, maybe it's over. It's been 7 years or plus 7 years. I'm so scared to even try it
yeah.
because the rash that I get is so intense. And so it's almost like bringing consciousness into those decisions, intention, purpose, and saying, okay, I'm going to eat this because it makes me feel better. I'm not going to eat this because if I do eat this, it's going to have a reaction. That wine thing, by the way, pretty much all of my girlfriends and a lot of my guy friends, there's no way we can drink wine like we used to. There's
Oh,
absolutely no. I
absolutely
mean,
not.
yeah, I'm like a 3 ounces in, and I wear my glucose patch. I wear a continuous glucose monitor. I have my Oura ring. I'm a data like nerd completely. I love to see like the impact that it has, and I
Mhm.
have to say the Oura ring has helped me so much in realizing that sleep is so important. I was barely getting like 5 hours, 6 hours. Now I'm doing 8 to 9 hours. Like, and people used to make fun of me, like, okay, it's 9 o'clock, I'm going up to bed. And people are like, that's you're going to bed. It's 9 o'clock on a Saturday. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
I need to make sure I get my sleep. I want to be up in the morning. I realize how important sleep is and the choices that we make. So I love that spin on that versus like the lack, but more the connection into I'm consciously going to choose these 5 Oreos. However, I realize my stomach's going to hurt, because of this gluten or because of, the pasty white in the middle that may agitate your stomach, and bring that in so that you're, as you called it, a diet detective. How much sleep do you recommend, by the way? I know you just mentioned that briefly, but I just wanted to come back to that.
Yeah, everyone's completely different. You have to figure it out. Like I had a client who, like from the point that he was a child, only needed like 5 hours of sleep, and his daughter was exactly the same as him. So it's
Mhm.
highly individual.
Yeah.
Um, here's a little tip. Like if you go to bed and within 30 seconds of hitting the pillow that you are out, you are probably sleep deprived.
Mm,
One really good way of figuring it out is when you go on vacation, see how much sleep you get on a regular night. And that's
that's
probably
great.
about how much you need. Yeah.
That's great. I'm reading this book that's very heavy. It's like
Mhm.
this really like a hardcover. They didn't have the soft cover. So anyway, I find that when I'm reading and the book starts falling on my face, I'm like, it's time for me to go to bed. That's like my signal. So I was going to ask you also. Well, let's dive into. Okay, so
Yeah.
you're an expert in nutrition as well, and there are a lot of misconceptions out there when it comes to dietary, I guess, guidelines for women in midlife. What should they be focusing on? You talked about getting enough sleep. It's all relative to who you are. You gave the tip about the vacation. You talked about connecting the dots when it comes to like, if I drink this, I feel like this the next day.
Mhm.
I'm sure you probably recommend journaling so that you can kind of, document what you're going through. Are there any other, what should we focus on instead of like achieving optimal health? Like, what are some other misconceptions that to be true for women in midlife?
Yeah. So, one of the other things that I wanna say is that I really love the idea of displacement. This is how I approach working with my clients is and what I mean by displacement is always adding things to your diet so that we crowd out the things that we don't want. So, instead of saying, "I'm not gonna eat any sweets anymore," what we wanna do is we wanna add in vegetables. So, I have this lead magnet, this opt-in, which is the 8 basic habits that healthy people do. And I think that it really sets a really good foundation for optimal health. And I say that if you follow these 8 basic habits, that you will be healthier than most people that you know. The 8 basic habits are not revolutionary. You've heard them before. They are drink water, eat vegetables, um, eat protein with every meal, move daily, manage your stress, get enough sleep, eat just enough, not too much, and then limit treats.
Mm,
Okay. And so those are really the basics. And what I find with a lot of us is that we go off and we do like these fancy diets. And as I mentioned before, fancy diets don't really work that well because we are taking out an entire macronutrient or like with if it fits your macros, that's just way too complicated. It doesn't
yeah.
have to be like that. Like just eat sensibly. And so, what we want to do is we want to have enough vegetables in our diet so that our body is getting enough nutrients. I love vegetables. Like I eat so many of them. And then making sure that you're getting enough protein. Protein is something that women in general, I don't know why, fall short on. And
Mm,
so getting enough protein is really super important, especially if you are in a calorie deficit. Because when we look at our body's physiology, we have fat and we have muscle and we have our organs, right? Muscle, you've probably heard, burns like, I don't know, like 10 calories per pound versus like 3 pounds of fat, whatever it is. I don't even know. Um, and so muscle is more metabolically active or expensive for the body to maintain. So if we are in a calorie deficit, it's really super important to have enough protein in your diet so that your body doesn't start using the protein on your muscles and it starts using the protein that's in your food. Additionally, what happens is as we move out of our reproductive years, we become more sensitive to insulin and more reactive to stress. And so our being a diabetic, you probably already know this, having the continuous glucose monitor, that if you eat something with just carbohydrates, like a baked potato, your blood sugar is going to spike and then it's going to drop. Versus if you put some chicken on there or some sort of protein in there, it's going to stabilize your blood sugar. And stable blood sugar is really the key to maintaining your weight and having good energy and feeling good and not having brain fog. So, protein is probably one of the bigger things that I have to work with my clients on.
yeah. And that's something that, going from that transition. So when I turned 50, they took pictures of me. We had this like beautiful event at my house. And Elizabeth, I looked so swollen. My face was just like like bloated, and I didn't look like myself. And it wasn't weight per se. It was just like literally like inflammation.
Yeah.
And that really got me into, and I was eating 1,300 calories a day. I was going to I was spinning every day, sometimes spinning twice a day. So I was doing all the quote unquote like healthy things to do, and eating tons of vegan stuff, which of course sometimes vegan things are not the healthiest because they're concoctions of chemicals that they've put together to make things taste
Oreos
like
are vegan.
sweets. Exactly. So I was, and I used my little air quotes, like I was healthy, but when I saw this picture of myself, so I got the glucose patch and I did a gut biome analysis, and come to find I was eating the worst things for myself. So I had been vegetarian since 1988, hadn't had any red meat, and went back and forth vegetarian, pescatarian, vegan for
Mhm.
30 something years, and really started kind of like listening to people like yourself, like professionals saying you need to eat 30 grams, 25 to 30 grams of protein every time you sit and eat something. You want to ideally have it to be based on your weight. I know there's some certain calculations, but some say, I weigh 150. So either 150 grams or 135 grams. So there's, back and forth, but it changed my entire world. I mean, it was just starting to eat things that I had never eaten before. And, you reminded me of this documentary that I just watched on Netflix. It's all about your gut biome, and just studying about that, and adding all these new foods into my diet really helped for me to get better at my optimal health. And I wanted to mention one thing really quick. You were saying about the sugar and the spikes, because that's why I wear the glucose monitor. My father's generation, his doctor was like, you have to, you're also diabetic. You have to be careful. He's going to be he's in his 80s. There's a disconnect in that generation. I'm sure you see this all the time, where my dad will say, well, I'll just eat a piece of bread because it's not sugar. But they don't understand that the piece of bread will spike. Like if I have two French fries, it will spike my sugar up. If I
Sure.
have a piece of bread, it will spike up. So there's a misconception or some sort of misinformation that doctors are telling their patients, like, you have to be careful with your sugar. And people think it's like a piece of cake or an ice cream, or or the Oreos, and not realizing it could be a potato, it could be French fries, it could be yams. Those are all considered, at least for myself with my glucose batch, those things go up. I mean, it just skyrockets 100 points just from a couple little French fries. It makes a huge difference. But
Yeah.
there's not, I don't know, there's a disconnect there with that age group.
Yeah. Well, we didn't have a lot of, I mean,
Yeah.
nutrition science is still actually relatively new.
Yeah.
So yeah, we don't know a lot.
Yeah. Anyway, this was so great. So just to kind of, we're wrapping up. We have like 8 minutes left, but I want to ask you two more questions. All right.
Yeah.
So Elizabeth and I were chatting a couple weeks ago, and I have no concept of time. I say a couple weeks ago, could have been like yesterday. But you mentioned you are a certified feminist coach, and I was so intrigued by this. I was like, wait, I don't want to know about it now. I want to wait until you're on the podcast. What is that? Feminist coach. I want you to learn more.
Yeah. So it was fantastic. Other than my life coaching certification, the feminist coaching certification like changed my life, and not just how I how I coach my clients, but
Yeah.
also how I look at myself.
Hmm.
So when we think about our conscious thoughts, we have, we have our body and we have our brain. But there's this whole set of rules that we operate under, which is our socialization. And so, what this certification did was it really opened up my eyes to the messages that we get from society about how women should act, what we should be, how we should, all of the rules that we have,
Hmm.
right? And so, how it plays into my coaching with my clients around health is that women, we were all raised with this idea that for women, it's more important to be attractive than it is to be anything else, to be smart.
Hmm. Hmm.
And if we are attractive enough, then we will score a successful man, right? The heteronormative
Yeah.
messaging. And what men receive is if you are successful, then you will get an attractive woman. And for women, our measure of attractiveness is based on our weight. And so for so many women that are our age, we are still operating under the idea that we have to be a certain weight or a certain size in order to be acceptable.
Mm.
And there's also a whole layer of ageism going on there, which I am dealing with right now, which was like came out of the blue. But I'm really glad that I have this coaching certification so that I can really look at my thoughts about it. And so, anyway, one of the things that I do now is when I hear myself judge myself or someone else, I ask myself, who decided that?
Mm.
So, like, when I hear myself, like, because we were talking just recently on a call, and I was like, I'm afraid to reach out to these people because I have this self doubt. I'm afraid that they're going to think that I'm judgy, or not judgy, but I'm afraid that they're going to think that I'm being pushy.
Yeah.
And in another call, I mentioned how I like to ask myself, well, what would a white man do? Right.
Yeah.
And I do that. And so when I think about that juxtaposition of, as a woman, this is how I'm supposed to act, this is how I'm supposed to be. And then I ask myself, well, if I was a white man, what would I be doing? How would I approach this? It really kind of just changes the game a little bit for me. Yeah.
I love that. It reminds me of that's why I think I love the movie Poor Things so much. I
Mm.
saw it with a bunch of girlfriends because it was such a spin on how you're supposed to behave, how you're supposed to act, how you're not supposed to say certain things. I know some people either hated it or loved it. I loved it. It was one of the best movies I've ever seen. Um, yeah, and I think that's a great. I mean, ageism that you mentioned that's a whole other podcast. I wrote
Yeah.
it down for us to touch upon that because, you know, what is that and how does it show up and what do you do about it and how do you maneuver that whole stage of life. All right, so my last question to you and for those that are listening, so Elizabeth lives in Mexico, and I love this about her. I'm in Miami. I go to Mexico for vacation. We've done obviously the Tulum and all the places that people love. But I'm so curious to hear, how did you like change your entire life, move up, pick up, and move to Mexico? Because I have so many friends that are starting to do that, and I just thought would be some sort of additional inspiration that you can give to our listeners and
Yeah,
watchers.
yeah, yeah. Great question. And so I'll try to give you the condensed version because I know that we're short on time. But about 12, 15 years ago, my husband and I spent a month in Belize. And
Wow.
that was the first time that we were like, could we do this? Now, back then, the internet wasn't very good. I was a personal trainer, so I hadn't done my coaching certification yet. And coaching wasn't even like a thing back then.
Right.
So it took a while for us to figure out where did we want to go. So we started visiting different cities in Mexico because we loved Mexico. We love the culture here. We love how simple things
Yeah.
are here.
Yeah.
And the other piece to it was that our American lifestyle was really kind of running us ragged. Like we
Yeah.
were both working to support. We had a 5-bedroom house in Austin, Texas. We had a pool. We had all of these things. We were living the American dream,
Yeah.
but it really wasn't fulfilling. We don't have kids. So we were able to just sell everything and move to Mexico. And since we did, it's really been fantastic. When we told our friends that we were moving, we got one of two different reactions. One was, "Oh my God, why are you doing that? You have everything. Like, why would you give it up?" And the other part was, "Oh my God, you guys are my heroes."
Yeah.
So, it's possible. And it was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I don't know,
I'm
being a
sure.
Cuban American, I don't know if you actually had to go through that or you were pretty young at the time, probably.
So I was the first batch born in the United States. My brother's
Got
from
it.
Charleston, and I was born in Miami. But my parents, yes, and I still hear the stories, right, of all family members that arrived to the country not knowing the language, the culture. Yeah. So I can only imagine what it must have been like for you. But how, and you've been there for how many years now?
We've been here for 7 years.
It's
We
amazing.
rented for the first 5 years, and within that period, we bought land and built a house, and we've been in the house now for 2 years. And it's our dream house, and it's amazing. And I think that someone suggested that we have a retreat down here for FemCity,
I
so
love that.
we can
Yeah.
host it.
So this guy, when I lived in Raleigh, North Carolina, the guy that used to cut my hair, he and his husband, they built a house in Mexico. They used to go all the time. And I think they live half the year there, half the year back over in Raleigh. And it's beautiful. I mean, the house that they built, you know what I love about at least the areas that I've visited in Mexico is the architecture is so incredible. It's this simplistic, the textures are all natural, simplistic lines. They have so much warmth. The tile is just so beautiful. So you have like these it's almost like a blend of contemporary with old Spanish, and it's warm and neutral at the same time. It's just beautiful. As a matter of fact, our backyard, I keep telling when we redo it, I'm like, it's going to be Tulum style because I'm fascinated by the just beautiful Moroccan tiles, those pieces of color that they pop in there, and then just like that stucco finish. Oh, it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
Anyway, Elizabeth, well, this was so great. I would love
Awesome.
to have you back
Yeah.
in some capacity with either ageism or even just talking about nutrition alone, just for midlife women. I think those are two other areas that I would love to explore with you. I'm so grateful that you took the time out of your busy day to share all that with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. And if people want,
I was going to ask you. Yeah, I was going to ask you. I was like, oh my gosh, how do people find you to learn more
yes,
about
so you can find me on Facebook and Instagram. I'm elizabeth.sherman.coach. I also have a podcast. It's called Total Health and Midlife. And so
Oh,
if you
great.
do want to learn more about all the topics that I'm talking about, that is probably the best way. I have over 175 episodes published. It started out as the Done with Dieting podcast. And then in January of this year, I shifted and rebranded to Total Health and Midlife. And so, yeah, that's where
I
you can
love
find
that.
me.
I love that. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. This was so great. And for those listening and watching, if you have any questions, let us know. But we'll be back here next week. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.